Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. Rick's on the road today, so he won't be here. For those watching the video, it's going to be a little bit different. We're trying to up the production, and I'm hoping out of this we get a little bit better audio for the people that are at home. So this will be some upcoming improvements over the next couple weeks. But we're going to get right into it with high tempo. What do you got for us this week, Matt?
Just on the home front. Dogs took a loss last week, played tough, looking to rebound. We're at 5-2 right now. Took a little bit of a slide in the District 6 rankings, but I think all in all we're in good shape going forward.
All right, yeah, hopefully you get a bounce back win next week. For the mailbag, or the high tempo for me, I pushed the mailbag to the end because it ties in with some of the NCAA stuff, and based on some comments we got, they don't want that up front. People want to get right to the Pittsburgh talk, but my high tempo is some of the Major League Baseball stuff. And I know, Matt, you have something on this, so we're going to use this as a segue into the Steel City update. But just to check in on Major League Baseball playoffs, the Brewers threw out a sweep in that first round, and I did not think that was going to happen. So a lot of people were coming at me on Twitter, and I'm just saying I'm shocked that the Brewers pulled that off because they had to play the extra game. They come in and they stayed hot. The Dodgers moved on as well here in the NL. So you're having the Dodgers versus the Brewers. The AL, I don't know if it's finalized. I know the Red Sox had an advantage, and so did the Astros. So that's looking like what we're going to get in the championship game. Matt, I know you heard some talk about a former Pirate, so why don't you go ahead and give us that?
Yeah, I was looking just at some different stuff, and with David Freese, soft spot in my heart because he's a former Cardinal, had the walk-off, and I believe Game 6 of the 2011 World Series for the Birds. He was playing for the Pirates for a little bit and found his way to the Dodgers and had a clutch hit in their win. And in his post-game conference, the thing that stood out to me is he came out and said, I expected to finish in Pittsburgh. He said in Pitt and ride it out this year. But then he said to wind up on an organization like this that wants to go after it. It was really a backhanded comment to the Pirates. It just seemed like they're in it just to make money as opposed to trying to win championships.
And I know we talk about it, and I don't want to harp on it. I don't want to get back into it. But that's pretty much our Pirate perspective. I would like to see some moves. I know Rick's been pretty strong when we talk about it on the show, going out in favor of developing talent and getting that in the farm system. But not much else to say. Playoff baseball is going on. Pirates aren't a part of it. So let's move on into the Steel City update a little bit deeper. Pittsburgh Penguins kicked off the season. What did that game end up being? 7-6? Is that what the final was against Washington? The first game?
35-34, I think. They just kept scoring touchdowns.
It was 4-3 in the second, right at the beginning. So I knew that game wasn't going to slow down. Offense seemed to be clicking. They dropped the second game. Right now have a -3 goal differential, which is something that I watched throughout the season. Huge in hockey and baseball, low-scoring sports. Are you able to get stops? And when you lose, are you actually competitive in those games? So it's only 2 games into the season. The big news coming out of Pittsburgh was that Matt Murray has a concussion. And we've talked about this for football. But as a goalie, I hate to see it. Because as a goalie, you have to have mental focus to even... I compare this to Wes Welker, someone in the NFL, a receiver, that once you start to have some concussions, your production's going to drop off. Because once he went through that string of concussions, it has to be very hard to concentrate on catching a football. Now, times that by 100, catching a puck, flying hundreds of miles through the air, definitely not good to have that happen to your goalie. So hopefully he's able to bounce back from that and get healthy. But that's what the Penguins need. Just get into the season, not too worried early on. Matt, you have any thoughts on them moving into the start of the NHL season?
I think it's early in the season. interesting to see the way that they're aligning the rotations, because there's always the discussion of do you split up your top 2 or 3 lines, or do you try to keep the stars together? And I kind of like what they're doing right now with Sid and Gino, and just kind of keeping that going. The formula's there. Just stick to it and win.
I'm still high on Gensel, and when he's in on those higher lines, it's awesome to have someone of that talent who's able to just get, whenever the pressure's off, to get into a position to score goals. So there's definitely excitement. It's not like you're relying only on the veterans to produce. You have young guys that hopefully will carry over for years to come. We'll be checking in on that later on once we get some more games under our belt. Moving on to the NFL, Steelers versus Falcons. I thought this was going to be a lot closer than it ended up being, and this is just a tale of 2 different teams. Since the Falcons lost that Super Bowl, they've been struggling as an organization, and they're basically a defense away. I know they didn't score so much on the Steelers this past week, but whenever your defense can't get off the field, the other team's defense is going to be fresh, like the Steelers were. So even though there's glaring holes in that Steelers defense, if you're off the field, they can't score. They let the Steelers control pretty much every part of that game. I don't know. I know it was close early, and I don't even think it was coaching adjustments. I just think that whatever happened to the Falcons, they're nearing a rebuild level, and with the offensive weapons they have, I don't know how you do that, because you don't have the depth to rebuild your team and compete. Matt, what are your thoughts on that game?
I thought, for the most part, Pittsburgh got back to Pittsburgh football. They played just enough defense, and they allowed Ben to make the moves. They got a lead, and then they cruised. You know, that seems to be the formula for them, is that they get themselves into these routine situations where they get up, and then there's not as much pressure on Ben to have to go out and win the game. He can be more time management. He can throw some more of the underneath routes, use the tight ends more, and I think that helps him. As far as Atlanta's concerned, I don't know that they're at a rebound type level, but definitely what's hurting them is not having Shanahan anymore. And Shanahan left after their Super Bowl year and was replaced by Sarkisian, who was pushed out of Alabama after they lost their national championship to Clemson. So he was forced out there. He came to the NFL. He runs the same relatively predictable offense. I was anticipating a big fantasy week, being that I have a lot of Falcon players on my team, and they just seemed off. So I don't know what the issue is there, but they have the talent that with both running backs, Coleman and Freeman. They have Sanu, Julio, and
Ridley.
The other is Ridley. You know, they have tons of talent, tons of weapons. It's just a matter of getting the defense, I think, like you said, shored up, and I think that they'll be okay.
Well, that division they're in is brutal, because you have the Saints with Drew Brees. As long as Drew Brees is there, I mean, the Saints are going to be competitive. Him and Tom Brady right now are approaching the top 2 spots in quarterback history. I think he just broke a record.
He just passed Peyton Manning.
Yeah, he passed Peyton Manning over the past weekend. Him and Tom Brady are both really close to the top of the record books, and he's still playing at a high level. He is just as old as Tom Brady. I think did they come into the draft? He might even be a little bit younger. So you're looking at teams that they have to compete against. They have to compete against them. They also have the Panthers, and the Panthers were just in the Super Bowl a few years ago. I don't know what to think of the Giants' collapse when the Panthers beat them over the past weekend. I don't know if that was a good win, but the Panthers are going to be competitive. And then you have the Buccaneers, who right now, they started hot and have kind of fallen off. So you're looking at a division that's very deep, and whenever you're there, it's going to be tough to win. So definitely got to have better defense in a division as explosive as that. Then across the other games, Man, John Gruden. I have to talk about it on the show because I've been a big proponent on him on Twitter, and I thought he was going to bounce back. He hasn't. Should have stayed in the booth right now. That's how it's looking. Dead last in that division, and the Chiefs are on fire. So I think the Raiders are pretty much already eliminated. I don't see them turning it around to make the playoffs. And my other observation is the Colts with Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck does not look the same. Whenever you're injured for that long, I know he had high talent. He's not going to come back. I feel bad for the guy. It's tough to face injuries, but I don't think he's going to be able to lead the Colts anywhere. And I could see him right now, when he was before his injuries, he was at elite status, or at least that's where his talent level was going to take him. And I think right now he's more at a journeyman level. So, Matt, you have any thoughts around the NFL you want to bring up? You can even dispute some of mine if you want.
I think as far as the Raiders are concerned, I think that Gruden's approach to it, because he does have ownership in the franchise, is what's the long-term success of the franchise going to be? And I think in his mind, he's thinking, I don't want this to be a, for lack of better wording, a Tampa deal where he comes in, he wins, it's an aging roster, and then those guys phase out and you don't have the talent to maintain a consistent run. I think it makes more sense financially to have a younger team build around some pieces and get his guys in that understand what he's about and get that going moving forward.
I agree he's going on a slow start, but that team was very competitive. The talent was there. Trading Khalil Mack might have worked if there was a locker room issue, but right now that seems to be their glaring need on defense.
Oh, it absolutely is. But the Madden player says, well, why wouldn't you keep the best player on there? And with what he's doing in Chicago right now, he's helping the Bears out tremendously. I think when you look at the end of the year, if they weren't willing to spend the type of money that they were going to have to keep him, they made out like gangbusters, picking up the first-round draft picks and the other picks as well in trading them. So you're at least getting something for them as opposed to letting them walk in free agency.
That's true. I think their team had high ceiling though. So if you're looking at a team with a mid to low ceiling, the Raiders they're double-digit wins a few years ago. Derek Carr gets hurt. Yeah, but they had that ceiling to get back into a deep run into the playoffs. You take your best player on defense, which is key in the playoffs. You get rid of him. He's instantly turned the Bears into a contender. They're in first right now in the North. Unheard of. How many people would have picked them? You know Aaron Rodgers was a sexy pick once again. That division, the Vikings, also a sexy pick because of Kirk Cousins and getting that all put together. But there right now, early in the season, the Bears have taken charge and are sitting at 3-1. Coming off their bye, it'll be interesting to see how they use that. They have an early bye. Young quarterback, played out of their minds against the Buccaneers before that bye week. And they could be one of the classes of the NFC. The only other team right now that's really stood out ahead of them is the Rams. But everyone knew coming in, that was your prediction last year, Matt, that the Rams were going to take a step forward. And they've continued that. So, I don't know. Go ahead. Any other thoughts around the league?
Just one of the things that is, I think, is a shocker right now to maybe some people. Looking at the AFC North standings, you have the Bengals at 4-1, and the Browns and Steelers tied in the basement at 2-1. I mean, who would have predicted it at this point of the year? Those kind of headaches.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a dogfight. I know a lot of people picked, I can't even talk right, the Browns to be competitive, but I think the big shocker here is that the Bengals are on top. I think most would have had the Steelers or the Ravens back on top, put the Bengals back where they belong in the middle. I think if it was flipped, the Steelers and the Bengals with the Steelers on top and the Browns and Bengals tied at 2-2, a lot of people would have had their picks correct. But how it stands right now, and it's going to be coming because the Steelers play the Bengals. It's Sunday at 1:00. So they play them this week. What do you think about that game going in?
Well, I don't know what to think. I mean, with them losing Tyler Eifert, I think that hurts them because he's a big part of their passing game. So I think that they lose that, but their defense plays well, and Pittsburgh's has been struggling. I wouldn't put it past Cincinnati to come out early and get a victory. Now, if it becomes a late season game and they're playing Cincinnati and there's something to be played for, Pittsburgh seems to rise to the challenge, and Cincinnati can't get over that mental hurdle. But early in the year, it seems like Pittsburgh typically has an upper hand. Actually, the thing that I was thinking about recently was we've discussed at length about Le'Veon Bell and with Antonio Brown and the different locker room issues that Pittsburgh has. Thinking around the league, look at the New York Giants with all of the hoopla around Odell Beckham and his contract and making moves and all of the issues that he has. And what do the Giants have to show for it? They're dead last in the division. I think they're 1-4 right now. So you spend the money, you have this player that is supposed to be the superstar of your franchise, and you're sitting at the bottom of the division. It's a team-based thing, not an individual-based thing.
Yeah, that's why I don't think the Steelers should push over the top for Bell, and I think that's why they were in their right to not push for those receivers in the past. Now, since you mentioned Brown, we might as well talk about he has been sued in Florida. It was back in April. They said that he rented an apartment, and these are just the preliminary details, so these might change. This is the initial report. But he rented an apartment, got into some type of argument, and had a breakdown where he just started smashing all the mirrors in the apartment, started throwing stuff off the balcony down below where there were kids. So there's a lawsuit against him. And for that to be brought up right now, to me, is always very strange. I think timing is always something that's planned ahead. Because if this was such a traumatic event for the children, I think they were named in the suit, why wasn't this brought almost immediately, a month later, 2 months later? You're telling me your kid can't sleep, and this is coming as a parent, that if your kid can't sleep, you're going to feel that for a month. You're going to go nuts. So after that, I mean, you're sitting there, you're waiting through May, June, July, August, September. It's half a year away. October, you roll around and you push this out. So I don't know. I'm not in his corner. I'm a guy that steps back, looks at the details, but that was a strategic release to do it right now. Because we know that the Steelers locker room was very rough. If you subscribe to our feed, I've been throwing in Jeff's episodes, Spaces or Laces. He does an extra show for you guys on the Southbound Sports Show podcast feed. And he talked about it last week with the locker room stuff, where Ben has been staring down Brown on key situations, third down. And if you watch the game, you know that he's right. Every time there's a big play, or as soon as Brown has one of his tirades,
there's an interception.
Yeah.
The interception that he had, I would have berated my sophomore quarterback if he did the thing that Ben did, and he's getting paid millions of dollars to do it. He stared him down. He threw into triple coverage. I mean, you check the boxes on everything bad that you can do as a quarterback, and he did it. And then he should know better. Unbelievable.
I think he's just doing it to stop the locker room arguments. The only way to shut Brown up is to throw the ball to him and say, look, you weren't open, make a play. And whatever Ben's doing, it's going to hurt the team, and you can't do that at any level. So I don't have high confidence that the Steelers are going to do well. This is a crucial stretch right now. They play the Bengals, they play the Browns, and they play the Ravens again. This is the second time through some of these teams, and it's for the division. After this, you're out of the division until the very last game of the year. You play the Bengals again. And like Matt said, you can't rely on the Bengals to choke every year. I mean, what was it? 2 years ago now was the big penalty on the Bengals late in that game. And that's the type of meltdown that you're used to seeing them do. But you got to get a win here because you started the season so poorly. And then you're going to go out of conference and you're out of division and you're going to play New England, which is never fun in the late months, as we remember last year with the Jesse James catch. So what do you do? I don't know. This is going to be the key stretch. I say you have to go win 2 of the 3. I don't think you have to beat any certain team. Bengals would be preferable just because they are ahead right now. But you got to win 2 of the 3. That's my final thoughts on the Steelers. Matt, do you have anything else to wrap us up?
I think that's it. I mean, just looking at some comparables of James Conner this year versus Le'Veon last year, they're producing similar stats. So if he was hoping that there was going to be some kind of drop-off, just seems like his Le'Veon's end game is he wants the guaranteed contract, but with the guaranteed contract comes the downside of, are you going to get the best effort and things like that?
Well, the other big rumor, right after I say I'm done, was that the Eagles were making room and they were cutting some contracts and stuff, that they were thinking about a trade. And I think their front office came out today and squashed that and said that they are in no way looking to trade Le'Veon. And I don't see why any team would, because you don't have that guaranteed contract. Next year, the same thing is going to happen. The Steelers are going to sign that tender, not the franchise tag, the other one, the transition tag or whatever it's called. It's hard to keep all these rules straight. But they're going to sign that so that now next year they'll be able to trade him and have him sign a long-term deal. And I think that's what you're going to have him wait for. He's going to play the tail end of this season. I think he wants to win. But until I see him on the field, it doesn't really matter. And then even if he comes back, are you sure he's going to give 100% every play? The locker room is already a mess. We don't need another guy calling for the ball. It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch Steeler football this year. So, that's all I got. Matt, you got anything else?
No, well, I do, but we'll move on.
And what else did you have? We're still early.
Just with the whole locker room thing, I think it makes it tough to watch when every week you have different guys that are making it about themselves. And it's draining from week to week that you just see, what's the latest antic that Brown's doing? What's the latest of this player, that player? It was nice for a while there where we had a run where there was a good locker room core with guys like Paul Malu, with the Hines Wards, the James Harrisons, that they knew what to do. They knew to work. They knew they held the standards that were set before, by the guys like Kevin Green and Greg Lloyd, that they wouldn't have put up with it. And I think it's tough when you have these guys that are so me-centered that it takes away from the team and it affects the way that they play. I don't know that the Eagles make the run that they do if they have all these guys worried about their guaranteed contract or how many touches they're getting. I loved hearing what Julio Jones said. The thing that he was worried most about was making his team better. And they were saying in one of the interviews, he talked about, do I care about how many touchdown passes I get? Do I care how many receptions I have? The only thing I care about is what makes the team better. And I think that shows where he's at as a professional, that making Atlanta better just by doing his job. And I really like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a problem across all sports, not just football either. You have it in basketball where you take a guy that's supposed to be a stud, can't get it done, no one can sign with them. And then if you try to join that team like Kevin Durant did, he didn't do the me thing. Went to the better team, went to the Golden State, but because that team was already on top everyone hated him for it. So you can't just be a team guy anymore. It's tough. It's tough across sports. And everyone wants you to be that star so they can market you. And if you don't deliver, like let's say Bell or Brown, let's say that they go and sign somewhere else and they don't deliver, then what happens? Then that's when you get all these stories about NFL guys are bitter towards the league or whatever they want. So let's go ahead. We'll jump into college football, I know we've been kind of putting this off just because we've been getting into big rants early in the show about baseball and other things. So Big Ten football this week, things are starting to clear up for Big Ten because you had the Penn State-Ohio State game 2 weeks ago. So you kind of have a feeling for what the tiebreakers are going to be. I will say right off the bat that the Big Ten and even the ESPN polls predict Ohio State's going to get into the playoffs. They're sitting at undefeated. Urban Meyer came out today that he's been having additional health issues, which we all called before the season. I saw a breakdown of recruits. They had one of their commits announced that he was going to transfer or whatever, take his commit elsewhere. I think he went to Indiana. Urban Meyer doesn't lose recruits to Indiana. You just don't. But since the news broke with his suspension, they've only gotten 2 guys and lost 1. So it's a slow period for college football right now. But when you're winning and other teams in that same time period are getting big-time recruits, it's definitely going to be a strain on the system. I think the reports on Urban Meyer is that he has migraines from a cyst that he's had for a while now. And I don't know any additional information on that, but that's what the Buckeye reporters were putting out there. So definitely hope it's not anything serious. But, I mean, the guy's going to get some flack after the way he left Florida, using the health issues to come back almost immediately to Ohio State. So they're in the driver's seat. They play Minnesota, and in years past, they've always dropped one game. And even if they drop one, it doesn't matter because it's going to come down to the Michigan game. They beat Michigan, and they're most likely in the championship game because they already have the Penn State game. Penn State, on the other hand, they need help. Penn State needs to win. They need to win out. You can't slip up.
Well, Christ, they got a lot of help. They had 3 teams in front of them lose over the weekend and jumped them up to 8 in the polls.
I don't think it matters, though. And you're right, they jumped in the polls, but that's not going to matter because they still have to play Michigan. They still have to play, and that's at Michigan. Franklin hasn't won there. So you're talking about a tall task for him. And then you also have Iowa in the cross-division game that they have to win. That is next weekend. They have played Michigan State this week, which Michigan State has dropped off, and so has their boy Herm Edwards. I know that was such a big win early in the year. We did what was one of the mailbag questions over-under on Herm Edwards wins, and he hasn't won really since that game. So kind of get all excited for no reason. But I don't know. I think Penn State, for them to win out, I would be shocked. And even if they did win out, let's say they win out and Ohio State wins out. Penn State's sitting there at, what would they end up? Would it be 11-1? I still don't think they get in the playoffs. And I'll give you 2 words, Notre Dame. And we're going to talk about Notre Dame when we get into the ACC talk here. They're not really part of the ACC, so the Clemson winning the ACC doesn't hurt them in any way. Doesn't help them, but it also doesn't hurt them. They don't play Clemson. So you could potentially see a team that's independent get in, and they most likely, if they're undefeated, or let's be honest, the committee loves big names. They already left Penn State out once for Ohio State. You think if Notre Dame is sitting there, Notre Dame is the number 1 school for tradition and viewership. They're gonna go ahead and pick them, and it's something that's already been out there. The Michigan-Wisconsin game this weekend for game day is a night game. A lot of people were thinking that they were going to pick, ESPN was going to pick Michigan-Penn State to be that night game this year. But I heard that ESPN and them already picked Notre Dame Northwestern that weekend. Not for game day yet, but for their broadcast, because they pick between Fox and ABC, take turns making their picks on which game they want. And that's how valuable Notre Dame is. That they would take a Notre Dame matchup against Northwestern over a top 10 matchup featuring Penn State. So Notre Dame would get in as long as if they have the same or better record than Penn State, they're 100% in, conference game or not. So, Matt, you have any thoughts on Penn State and how the Big Ten race shakes up here before we get into the games this weekend?
Well, I think when you're looking at that, Penn State, when the committee looks at the teams that deserve to get in, when you play the cupcakes, yeah, you got the wins, but who are your quality wins against? When they're against nobodies, and you stumbled against Ohio State, it hurts you. So, I think this is where that time of year where now you got to hope that someone else loses to try to use that as your argument that, if you're Penn State, if Ohio State does have that slip, then it becomes, well, they lost, so we should be the ones in. And they have no stronger of a foothold than any other program. So it still comes down to you got to win your games, but I don't know. We're going to have to see.
Yeah, that's counting on wins, and I know this is early. The big win that helps them is Texas over Oklahoma. And that doesn't even put the Big 12 out of it because West Virginia is still undefeated. And undefeated West Virginia, I think they're ahead of Penn State right now, but they would most likely stay there. The only situation... Go ahead, Matt.
The kicker with that, though, is the Big 12, in my opinion, it hurts them in a lot of ways, but they have a true conference championship. Because
100% that's going to hurt them.
The two top teams in their conference, and you have to play again. So potentially you could have the Red River rivalry part 2. If losses happen, if people come, like if the chips fall a certain way, they could end up having a rematch and having to play that game again for your conference championship. I mean, you look at there's not many other conferences that would even think about doing something like that to try to give yourself a stronger footing within your conference and within for the people selecting the bowls. Well, I think if you're playing a team like that twice, if you had to play Ohio State twice a year and that was going to be your end, you'd be a lock for a playoff spot if you beat them twice in 1 year.
Well, Matt, I will say I've got to give credit to the ACC here. They tried to do that. Was it a year or two ago when Clemson played, who was it, North Carolina or someone, or was it that Georgia Tech team that only had a couple wins? They tried to get the NCAA to rule that they could decide who their championship game was against. And I think they took the wrong approach because I think they should have got rid of the divisions and approached them and said, hey, we're going to play pods. I've been a big proponent of pods. If you get to 16 teams, you get a pod of 4 teams. So you keep your regional rivalries where, let's say, I'm not familiar with the ACC divisions as well as I am for the Big Ten, but let's say you have a Western pod in the Big Ten where it's like Nebraska, Iowa, Northwestern, and Illinois or something. Then you have a Northern pod where it's like Wisconsin, Minnesota. You throw in Michigan State and then one of the other teams that fills that out, Indiana, Purdue. And then you just keep moving over. And then the best 2 records play against each other. But each year that the second pod would play. So like, let's say those 2 pods are the West Division right now, minus Michigan State. They would move over for balance because you would have a pod of Ohio State and Michigan. And then Penn State would have their own Eastern pod. And they would have to add other teams because right now the Big Ten only has 14 teams for it to work. But you have the pods, you balance them out, and then you potentially have your brand names split up. You have the Ohio States and Michigans in that same pod because most likely one of them is going to come out and they're going to come out unscathed or at least close to it historically. Ohio State's been on the run. The decade before it was Michigan, and then they just rotate every couple decades. Michigan and Ohio State are perennially strong. You put Penn State in its own pod, and then they're strong. So maybe in the cycle year or whatever, they don't play that Penn State or they don't play that Michigan Ohio State pod till the championship game. And I think if the ACC would have approached it that way and separated a pod into the South where it was like I wouldn't have put Clemson with Florida State and Miami, but I definitely would have put Florida State and Miami together, because I think when you have two strong programs recruiting against each other and playing every year and making it matter for that, they're not in the same division right now, and I think that is the decision that really hurt the ACC, and it hurt the Big Ten when they originally went to divisions. You took your two big powers, you separated them and said, hey, they're going to meet in the championship game. Looks awesome on paper. Doesn't work out. If you play them in the same, then they have to recruit against each other because they're playing the same exact teams. So I think if the ACC would have did that, it would have worked out, and then you wouldn't have what you've been seeing a lot of Penn State fans checking out, because there's really no way for them to get into the championship game, they feel, just because all three big teams right now are in the same division. Split them up into pods. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a lot of thinking to have to go into all of that. To me, I think as a fan, I like the model that the Big 12 uses. However, I'm glad that for the ACC's sake that they're doing it the way that they do. As a fan of Florida State, I would hate to have to be in a situation where you're mowing through your conference and then you have to replay a Miami in an upswing, or with where Clemson is now, to have to beat them twice in a year. It's tough enough playing those kind of teams once a year, let alone having to play them two times, and then having no like the committee's not going to look at you favorably beating them early in the year and then losing the conference championship game. Unless you're an SEC program, you're not going to get that tip of the cap like Georgia got last year, Alabama got last year.
Well, I will say this. I think you're right, and we haven't seen it happen yet. I don't think there's been a conference championship game upset since these playoffs came around. And that's the one scenario that a lot of Penn State fans are overlooking. Let's say Ohio State does drop one. They beat Michigan. They're sitting there with one loss, and then they lose to Wisconsin. Then you have a Wisconsin that potentially could be in that championship game with 2 losses, 3 losses, whatever. Or if they do lose that many, maybe Iowa's in that game. So then who gets in if all those teams are sitting there out? The Big 12 champion could have even more wins or more losses on their resume, because both of those teams, Texas and Oklahoma, have to play West Virginia, and West Virginia still has to play a lot of other teams. Plus, West Virginia lost a game against NC State, and that's shaping up to be a gigantic game in 2 weeks in the ACC, and we can transition here to the ACC. The way it's looking for the ACC, at least that, I don't know the name of the divisions, but the division with Clemson and Florida State and NC State, next weekend, NC State is traveling down to Clemson. I think it's homecoming. Both undefeated right now, as long as Clemson wins this weekend. I think NC State's on a bye. That's the biggest game right there of the year. That's going to be potentially the swing game, because at that point, you're how many games into the season? You would have to lose twice. NC State could beat Clemson, and they would have to lose twice, even if they dropped one. Most likely they're in, and then does that eliminate Clemson? We haven't seen a scenario like that, where what happens whenever the conference championship doesn't include the best team. Really, well,
let's look at this scenario. So Georgia wins out and Alabama wins out, and they meet in the conference championship game as undefeated teams. This is that backdoor scenario where last week or 2 weeks ago you were talking about how there's no way the Big Ten's being left out again. If Georgia and Alabama are undefeated at that point, there's 2 of those teams in. Notre Dame's a wild card that if they continue to win games and not fall for the trap here coming up against Pitt, there's your 3rd team. Now you could be looking at one of the Big 12 programs, potentially Clemson. It muddies the water for a Big 10 team to get in.
Oh, I'll say this. It's definitely muddy when you throw Notre Dame in. But right now, I don't think anyone beats Ohio State. So I think Ohio State's in, and they're probably going to be a 1 or 2 seed. And I'll go on record saying that after the Penn State win, you're playing Michigan at home. Have you seen Michigan play on the road? Until Michigan shows up on the road, and they play Michigan State next week on the road, and then I think their only other road game is Rutgers, maybe? I think it is Rutgers. Or maybe they have them at home. Like, they might only have 2 more road games. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they haven't shown up on the road. What makes you think they're going to go into Ohio State and beat them? So I'm thinking Ohio State is really, right now, the way they made it through their schedule, they're going to be sitting undefeated most likely. Michigan State does not look good. I don't see them beating Ohio State. Ohio State can sit back and out-talent teams in the Big Ten, and especially the lower half of the Big Ten East, which is who they have remaining. They beat Minnesota. Minnesota's still in a transition. They don't have the talent to compete. I mean, was it last year or 2 years ago? Michigan ran them out of the building, and Michigan doesn't have that level of talent. They have great talent, but it's not the Ohio State level. So you can have a mistake game and still win. They just don't have that trap game like they did last year at Iowa or at Wisconsin or at a team that can actually, I think, have the talent to upset them. The closest, I think, is going to be at Purdue. That's next week. So in 2 weeks, we'll know. Are they going to win at Purdue? I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're going to be undefeated, and then that's where you have the committee. They're going to be sweating because, like, your scenario there, Matt, could very well play out. You have Ohio State undefeated in. Then you have SEC champ in. Now you're choosing between a one-loss, let's say Georgia again. Georgia loses that championship game. A one-loss Georgia, undefeated Clemson, undefeated Notre Dame. Go. Who do you leave out?
To me, I would probably leave. I'd probably leave Clemson out, just because with struggling for Syracuse, with not blowing teams out like a top team should. And I think, being cynical, you're right. Notre Dame will sell wherever they go, and it'll be a moneymaker for them. So if they win, they're going to be in. Now, I would say if they get in, I can see them getting slammed like they did last time they went to the national championship game and got pummeled. I can see that scenario playing itself out, but I don't think you can discredit them or take their seat away because they got their butts kicked a couple years ago.
They look different with Book. There were some rumors today that he was going to be suspended on academic probation, but I don't know if I saw an official source. I saw some other newspapers report that it wasn't true. They're right in the middle of midterms right now at Notre Dame. I believe it's this week. So you're looking at that. That could throw a wrench in the season. And I mean, they still have to play USC. So a lot of these teams, we're going to know, I would think, in, 3 weeks? Or no, wait, it might be 4. I'll say in 2 weeks, we'll know, at least from the Big Ten, because at that time, Michigan will have played Wisconsin and Michigan State. The Wisconsin game this week, Michigan has at home. I think they're 7.5-point favorites. 7.5-point favorites against Wisconsin. They win that one, and they beat Michigan State. You're going to have the Big Ten top 3 teams at least get into a round robin, I would think, or somewhere close where Penn State could beat Michigan, Michigan beats Ohio State, or somewhere likely. You'll start to see that picture clear up a little bit. And in that same time period, Clemson plays NC State, and we'll see if they're going to be basically for real. At that point, Georgia also plays some top teams. I think they have the same time frame.
Even though on paper it looks like Notre Dame's going to cruise, I don't think that they have it as easy as you think, because they're playing Pitt this week. They're playing Florida State at Notre Dame November 10th. And for as bad as Florida State has looked at times, they are getting better. They let one slide this weekend versus Miami. They had a call late in the game. Miami started to build their comeback. Florida State threw a double pass. They threw a lateral back to the receiver, who then threw it downfield for a touchdown pass. The refs called it on the field instead of allowing it to be a touchdown and letting it be reviewed on the field. They called it a forward pass, so that it wasn't a reviewable play. All the video evidence and everything showed that it was clearly caught behind where the quarterback was when he threw. It changes the flow of the game from a one-score game, or with the score, a two-score game, back to a one-score. Miami came back and it jumped out ahead, so it hurt them this week, and the screwing hurts extra coming from at the expense of playing Miami.
Oh, I'll say this. I know which play you're talking about, and I knew you were going to bring this up. When I saw it live, I thought it was a forward pass because they didn't have the camera angle that I talked about from a couple years ago with the Michigan-Ohio State game. Get the camera that looks right down the line. Do you know how they showed the proof? It took an ESPN guy. He drew a straight line on the video connecting the two hash marks or whatever. The ref doesn't see that in his initial review. So even if it was a reviewable play, he wouldn't see that doctored up line. And if by looking at the camera angle they had, it looked like a forward pass. It wasn't until they actually drew that line. So I don't know. I talked about it last week, and I hate to bring it up. It's the refs. The NCAA needs to get all the refs together, and they need to start to monitor it. You're monitoring all these student athletes for getting money here, getting money there, whatever. Great. But why don't you go ahead and make your product better? They're just sitting back collecting the cash. They don't care. They don't care. Florida State's already bad in their eyes. They're like, they're not going to make noise in the playoffs. We don't care. So they don't care if the call goes against them. Excuse me. And that's as brutal as you can get. So I don't know. And unless the bigger teams band together and they want it, I just don't think it's going to happen.
But I tell you what, in the ACC, Florida State has been notorious for not getting calls, or they're the ones that end up picking up those targeting calls and what have you. And I know every fan base has people that say that, but I feel like when you look by and large, the games that Florida State has played, and especially within the last couple of years, there's always targeting penalties. There's always things that could go either way that always go against them.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up because last week, did I mention it? There was a Michigan graphic that came out that showed that Michigan got no holding calls against them. And Don Brown, the defensive coordinator, came out and said, look, we've had all these NFL draft picks. You're telling me that the guys never have to hold NFL talent? If you watched the Maryland game on Saturday, I felt so bad for them because every time a Michigan guy got a break flag, there must have been at least 5 holding calls because I know why. The refs were told, hey, call some holdings to even this out. This looks really bad. So now at the end of the year, they're going to be like, look, you guys are right in the middle of that, right where everyone else is right in the middle. Yeah, we don't not call holds on you because they all called them in one game. So Don Brown should have waited till the Ohio State game to throw that graphic out there. We didn't need those holding calls against Maryland. We needed to save them. For Penn State or Wisconsin or Ohio State, he should have waited one more week at least.
Well, I know during pregame, like even at our level, we have meetings with the officials and they go over any concerns, any things like that. And to me, there was a crew that I worked with that I really liked. That the fact that they just came right out and said, "Look, every single play we can call hold if we want to. We're not going to, unless it's something that's going to change the outcome of the play. We're not going to call it." So as an example, I was watching the Notre Dame Virginia Tech game, and let me just pull, because I saved the picture of it because I was yelling from the couch. But there was a touchdown pass that it wasn't even there. They called an ineligible lineman downfield, and the lineman's at the bottom of the screen, and the play is going to the top. So it had no bearance, no change, no impact on the play at all. But they call the penalty. Unnecessary penalty. I can see if it's something that's going to have an impact on the play, but when you have crews that are just honest and just say, if it's not impeding the play, we're going to let it go. I don't mind that. And if you're going to call it both ways, I especially like it. Just be honest with what you're going to do and then do it. I hate where there's plays where we've had guys that they get called for a face mask penalty, and then our guy grabs the face mask and gets it spun around, and they're like, no, I didn't see nothing. Those are the games that I get frustrated.
Oh, I can give you. Well, let me give you two breakdowns. The first one was the Michigan game, where this year there was a face mask, like you said. I forget who they played. It was on a kick return. I think it might have been Nebraska. The refs didn't call it until they watched the replay on the screen. So I would guarantee that if they didn't show that replay, they never would have called the penalty. And the other one, lineman downfield. And this goes back to the point I said about them drawing the lines on the teleprompter or whatever. The Syracuse-Clemson game, before the unquestionably crazy roughing the linemen whenever they pancaked that guy we talked about a couple weeks ago, there was a play where Syracuse ran like a fake on, I think it was a 4th down, and they did a tight end jump pass. Well, they called lineman downfield. If you watch the video, the lineman looks like he's ridiculously downfield, but the rule is under 4 yards. Well, after that play, the refs reviewed it or whatever, said that he was downfield. The ESPN guys then drew those two lines like they did in the Clemson or the Florida State Miami game, drew the lines on the teleprompter. He was only 3 yards downfield. So it wasn't a penalty in the rule book. But because the refs didn't have that markup where you can say, hey, here's the 100% definitive proof, they didn't overturn it. So that's why I think you put a guy in the booth. Put a guy in the booth. If you guys heard that beeping, that was Rick trying to call in, so I'll try to add him on here for the last segment. Matt, you have anything before we'll go through it? We'll just do general picks here. Anything else about ACC you want to get while I get him on the line?
Yeah, I want to see what this Pitt Notre Dame game is going to be, and I think that this is something that it's a total trap potentially for Notre Dame, because let's face it, Pitt has no reason that they should be in the game, that they should be a part of it. But you know what? For whatever reason, they play up against to their competition. You know, you look at what they've done recently. They've knocked off Clemson. They've knocked off Penn State. There have been 3 games in 3 consecutive years where they've changed the outcome of the game of some different teams' playoff chances by ruining it for them by playing competitive in games they shouldn't. I think Narduzzi does a good job, for the most part, having his game plans ready. I think it falls flat in terms of execution. I think that comes from not getting the recruits, not keeping the recruits at home. When you bleed people out from the WPIAL, it definitely affects them, because you see that talent goes to Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, West Virginia, and they can't keep them at home. If he can somehow get the coaches to make that work, and he can keep some of the talent at home, and he's not relying on 2-star hearts, I think you see a change in Pitt.
Oh, I'll say 100%. I didn't realize I talked about Khalid Hudson from Michigan, was a Pittsburgh guy or somewhere around there. The most productive D lineman Michigan has, Chase Winovich, was from Pittsburgh too. So you have guys that they need to keep there. And I text Jeff, big Pitt guy. He might have thought I was joking. They need to bring Wanstead back. He was a hell of a recruiter. Not as a head coach, Matt. You bring him in as a recruiter. How many parents and other guys or other coaches hiring, you take the guy that had the most success, at least in recent times, recruiting at Pitt, Wanstead. You bring him back. Get him around the program. Have they even invited him back? That's the guy you need if you're going to boost the program. Sure, you can get lucky and knock off an overrated Miami last year. What were they rated 2 in the country or something crazy? It pads the stats, but you shouldn't lose to a god-awful UNC team this year. People are ready to run Fedora out down here in Chapel Hill. And there's Narduzzi giving him a win. A signature win, probably. Especially if he knocks off Notre Dame. So, I don't know. Of course, if I'm a Notre Dame fan, yeah, I'm scared as hell. Because Pitt, you never know what Pitt team you're going to get. They played Penn State tough for the first half. So, I don't know. Rick, welcome on, dude.
Good to be on. Can you guys see me? This internet connection I have is not the best, right?
I got you.
Okay.
Went through. We're talking college football. What do you got? What do you got for this week? Any predictions?
Any predictions for this week? I think when you think about this week, I think the main thing is, especially with the upsets of last week, are there going to be any upsets this week? I think that's one thought, because it seems like this year, out of the top 10, it seems like, 2 or 3 teams out of the top 10 every week are figuring a way out of the top 10 instead of figuring a way to stay in it. So, I think that's going to be my main thing. Are these guys staying, or are they going? And I'm going to look down through some of the games. There shouldn't be that. I know there's a couple big games. I just lost Rich. But, but I don't know how many big games there are. And out of the top 10, I'm going to go right now to it. So, but Pitt's got Notre Dame. I know ESPN is going there, whatever the Mike and Mike show, whatever that became now. They're going to that one. Can Washington stay in against Oregon? Could Georgia beat LSU? They should be able to beat LSU. But Alabama's playing Missouri. They should be able to win. So I think it's more, can you stay in? And some teams are going on a bye this week too. But I think that's the main thing. Can you stay in?
Rick, do you think Penn State can stay in?
They have Michigan State this week, and it's at home. I will say this, that they have had their way with Michigan State recently. Michigan State, this isn't the team that went 4. They were finished like in the top 4 or 5, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when Cook was there. This team is a shell of that team. So I think they get the win this week. I will say this. I would love, and I know I've said this before, Pitt's that team that spoils teams out of the top 4, beating Miami last year, Penn State the year before, was a Clemson the year before that. I like Notre Dame at home. It's Notre Dame at home. You're playing in front of all the Notre Dame people. It'd be different if it was in Pittsburgh, but it's in Notre Dame. That's a tough game. Anybody that goes into Notre Dame, good luck to you, And this team's especially tough. And that's the same thing with Penn State. Michigan State has to come in to play them. So, I don't see Ohio State losing. They got Minnesota, but Minnesota has to come in too. A lot of these teams are playing at home. So I always favor the home team. I know Vegas always favors the home team too. So,
if you had to pick one upset, what would it be?
Ooh, I'll take a weird one. Not weird. Maybe I'll take Washington losing to Oregon.
I thought you were going to take mine. I'll have USC.
That's not a weird one. It's a 17-7. That's 10 spots. That's not a lot.
I was going to have USC knocking Colorado off the unbeatens. Colorado's 5-0, ranked 19th. They're lower. That's your Pac-12 after dark game. I think it's the game. It's on Fox Sports 1. So you could definitely watch that one, but I like those late night Saturday games. After you watch Michigan take down Wisconsin, you'll be able to tune in and see USC knock off Colorado, and will almost officially eliminate the Pac-12 from the playoffs, especially if yours holds true, Rick, and having Washington lose. Matt, what do you got for an upset this week?
I actually like Pitt on the road, just because there's no reason for them to be in that game. They'll just show up and score all kinds of points and have trick plays. I'll go with the Panthers.
Wait, when Pitt upset Penn State, that was a home game. When Pitt beat Miami in the upset, that was a home game. Now, when they beat Clemson, was that a home or away game? I want to say it was away.
Are you sure the Miami game wasn't home?
No, wait. Miami what? Yeah, wasn't Miami on? Yeah, Miami was home because they were making a joke on the radio broadcast it was I think it was the ESPN affiliate, how many Miami fans came up to Pittsburgh. And I think it was a November game They couldn't believe that Miami
it was around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, they couldn't believe how many Miami fans would want to come to Pittsburgh in November. They're like, it's Pittsburgh in November. It's going to be cold and blustery. And that game, it was weird because it had good weather. So, yeah. I like Pitt more in upsets at home more than away. Because I can't remember that Clemson game from 3 years ago. Was Pitt at home or away? I want to say they were home. It was like a Thursday or Friday night game at home. It was a weird game.
I don't know. I'll see if I can find it, but I think you might be right.
When they upset at home. So I do like Pitt being an upset spoiler, but not this weekend, though.
Their only other chance would be at Miami, really, in terms of spoiler that year. So they played number 1 Clemson. Of course, this doesn't say. I think it was at Pittsburgh. So that would have been the big game. So all 3 of their big upsets were at Pittsburgh. Or no, they were at Clemson that year.
They were at Clemson.
Yeah,
it was an afternoon game.
Was it an afternoon? Why? I don't know.
3:30.
Yes, it was
3:30 on Saturday. So
it would end.
You know why I know? Because I shouldn't remember. Stupid stuff I don't need to know. I can recall.
I didn't know where you were going with that. I thought you were going to say you were drunk or something.
No, it's just because I have no reason to know or remember. But I'll remember that.
Yeah, but if Pitt wins, this could be the game that keeps Notre Dame out in a way, because the schedule does favor Notre Dame the rest of the way a little bit, because after Pitt, they have Navy, Northwestern, Florida State, Syracuse, and USC. They don't play another ranked opponent.
You know the team that will keep them out and has the best chance is Florida State. Florida State and USC. Notre Dame could still end up with 3 losses if they lose to Pitt. So, I mean, if they haven't faced adversity yet, they played Michigan, but that was at home. Most of their other games where they were close, Vanderbilt, I think, was at home. So they haven't been on the road to face teams and faced adversity late in the season. We'll see how they do. So
yeah, they're tougher opponents. Michigan, Vanderbilt, Stanford have all been home. Their toughest opponent was the road game against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech also lost to Old Dominion, so they're not even that good.
Well, they lost like a gazillion guys to getting kicked off the team and suspensions and injuries. Not even the same Vautech team.
Oh my gosh, Matt, you sound like a Florida fan.
Oh, bite me.
If you want the guys on your team, don't get them suspended. Easy as that.
I agree. I agree.
You know what? I'm going to give my for sure to Oregon being the upset, but my dark horse, I'm going to say Pitt. I will say it because Pitt has that tendency, and this is probably going to be their tendency game. They're going to do it on the road instead.
So what a surprise on the Pittsburgh-based podcast. Everyone's picking Pitt to pull off the upset this week. Get those.
That would be
history's on our side. They show up for one game, and then it gives you just enough hope. You don't know what it's like being a Pitt fan. I've watched my dad break multiple things in my house, as he just says they're finally turning a corner, and then you just have your heart ripped back out again.
What your dad? My favorite thing he told me recently was that Pitt puts up a pat signal, almost like the bat signal, but it's a pat signal whenever they have a recruit down there ready to commit, and he hates it. So if they beat Notre Dame, I'll get him a pat signal T-shirt he can wear around.
But this would be the game that would keep Notre Dame out. I mean, if they run the table, they're in.
Rick, we talked about scenarios, and right now it's shaping up to be 5 teams. So most likely, either the loser of the SEC championship game, Georgia or Alabama, is going to be down with Clemson or Notre Dame as in those 3 and 4 spots. That's taking an undefeated Ohio State and an undefeated SEC champ into the game. So you're going to definitely have a logjam right now with 5 teams. Luckily, Oklahoma lost, make things a little bit clearer for the committee, but you still have undefeated West Virginia too if they run the table and beat Oklahoma or Texas twice in the season with that Big 12 championship game, they 100% have to be in. So things could change. We'll see. Anything else you guys want to talk about? What do we give our predictions on the games? The two big ones we had. Well, you guys just said Pitt, Notre Dame. I'm taking Notre Dame in that game, so I'll be the odd man out. Pitt falls apart, and they don't have the talent. And I think they've been losing talent every year under Narduzzi. He doesn't recruit as well as what he's come into. Like I said, hire Wannstedt or someone that knows the area. Just hire better recruiters. He needs to do what other coaches do and just hire high school coaches that can bring in guys and that know the ground level. That's what he needs to do. He'll never compete with the bigger schools, Penn State's, Ohio State's, Michigan's, Michigan State's, right in that same area, pulling recruits. He's never going to do it unless he makes some staff adjustments. Then I will say, let's get into Georgia LSU. Who do you guys have in that one? Matt?
Georgia.
Rick, what do you say?
I'll take Georgia too. I think they got too much talent on that roster.
I don't even know where that game is. But I'll say, well, I know it's going to be Georgia. But I'm hoping that the Cajun Brady Hoke pulls that one out because Ed Orgeron, he needs some wins. And I wouldn't be surprised, but I think right now ESPN is hoping that LSU wins because they're going to have a huge showdown with LSU, Alabama in a few weeks. So keep an eye on that because also that East Division, they still have to play Kentucky and Georgia still has to play Florida. And I think those are all coming up relatively soon. What else do we have with the other big ones? Rick, you said Oregon over Washington. Matt, who do you have in that one?
I'll take Oregon just because I would love to see Oregon lose, so they'll win.
Why would you want to see Oregon lose? First off, is that a Willie Taggart thing? Is that a
Vendetta? Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I just wanted to just see if that's what it was. I think Washington is going to win that game, and I think they're going to make it really close for the committee with a one-loss team, and it's going to be them, and they lost to an SEC team. Even though Auburn doesn't look as strong, I think that they're the only ones right now that has depth. Although I'd love to see my man Mike Leach keep them out with an Apple. What do they call that game? The Apple Cup? An Apple Cup loss late in the season. Big Ten, who do you guys have? Rick, Penn State and Michigan State.
Penn State at home.
Matt?
Yeah, I'll go Penn State, I guess.
I'm going to be on that same. Penn State. Michigan State is falling apart right now. And this is going to be, they already had, Michigan State put out all their roster of all their injured guys. And they had 20 guys on that list. And I guarantee that D'Antonio is holding them out this week so that they're healthy for Michigan next week. Don't put it past that guy. He'll be ready to go. And speaking of that, Michigan, Wisconsin. Who do you guys got? Matt, I'll start with you this time.
Oh, I think a meteor is going to hit the stadium. It'll be nobody.
So you're saying Michigan?
No, I'm going to go Wisconsin.
Rick, who do you have?
Isn't there a tropical storm coming?
That's in Florida.
No, it's in Florida. Oh, darn. Not going to hit Michigan. Okay. Well, since the game's going to get played, I'm going to take Michigan. They're the home team.
I think Wisconsin plays right into Michigan's strength. They beat him at home 2 years ago. I think they beat him again this year. Last year they were close on the road. I think quarterback play was the difference. And I think Shea Patterson's starting to click in the offense. So this will be the big stretch in the Big Ten. What happens? Because Penn State has Michigan State, then who they play? Iowa. Then they play Michigan. Michigan has, or I might have missed a game in there for Penn State. But Michigan has Wisconsin, Michigan State, and then Penn State. So this is a big key 3-game stretch on who's going to be competing with Ohio State for that championship. Any other games you guys wanted to hit on? I think those are most of the big ones here in the scores.
Yeah. It's Michigan State, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan for Penn State, the next 4.
So they play Indiana in there? Yeah, because I think Michigan has a bye. That's what's throwing me off.
Yeah. And that's at Indiana, which should still be fine.
Let's get into, we did have a mailbag question. It was just about the college basketball things. Any new outcomes yet? there hasn't been many coverage on this, so we don't have additional details. I did see that they had Ty Streets, the old Michigan wide receiver, has been named as paying for AAU basketball players. He has an AAU basketball team, and he's been paying players to come play for him. So he's one of the guys that has been named that has come out, and they're really trying to make it seem like Oregon was bidding with Nike money, but it's kind of like no one's covering it, so we don't have all the details. Really hard to follow. Although I will say, in that Ty Streets thing, someone brought out the NCAA rule that said since Ty Streets played at Michigan, he is a lifetime booster of Michigan, so they're trying to tie it back to Michigan. And also in that same thing, I learned that since I had season tickets at Michigan, I'm a lifetime booster. So that means that any Penn State fan that bought Pitt season tickets to get into that game this year is considered a Pitt booster. So, Rick, I hear you laughing. By the NCAA rule book, all those new Pitt boosters this year must be killing in that athletic department. You have any comment on that?
That's just strange. That's just strange. Well, who? I don't get it. Why? Let's say that I'm going to give you a perfect example. Joe Juravicius, not a fan of Penn State anymore. Everybody knows he was a Penn State wide receiver, had a good career there. Went on to the NFL, Tampa Bay, Cleveland, other teams. Good career. Retired. He's not a Penn State alum. He hasn't been back to any events. They invite him back. He's not coming. He's already on record saying he's never coming back. Who says that, I don't get that lifetime achievement award that you give out. Who says Ty Streets, his brother didn't go to, Hawaii for all we know, and he's a Hawaii fan right now. Who says that? I don't get that. That's just weird to me. Like, people change teams, they change alliances, and everything. I mean, heck, if you go to the county that's south of me, you see a lot of Raiders fans because Jeff Hostetler played for the Raiders, and a bunch of people are like, we're Raiders fans now.
That's very true.
But we're now Raiders fans because Jeff Hostetler was on that team. I don't get it. I mean, people change alliances so much. I mean, heck, if you would have caught me in high school, I used to have a Jamal Anderson jersey, and I loved the Falcons at one time because I love Jamal Anderson. Obviously.
How about you give us a little bit of the Dirty Bird right now?
I'm not wearing my Jamal. Yeah, I'm not wearing.
He has to wear his jersey to be in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, I still have it in my house, but I'm not going to be wearing that anytime soon. So I don't get it. I don't get the thinking there. But it's like a lifetime achievement award. You do it once, you're doing it for life.
I can't comment on the graduation thing. He might be an alum, which might add into it for the lifetime booster deal. I don't know. But that was the rule book that someone had taken a screenshot out to try to implicate other schools. I don't think it would hold up because if he doesn't, I think the rule book said specifically for recruiting purposes, and he was recruiting for his AAU team, which is nothing to do with the NCAA. So it would be the next person in. I think they were just trying. It was the kid that actually ended up getting paid by Louisville, that Bowen kid. Bowen. That's the kid that had said that he was offered $5,000 by Ty Streets to play on his AAU team. So I don't know. That's all I have on that. And like I said, we're going to wait till all the testimonies come out and we'll be getting back into that. Let's go around for the final bell. And if there's anything you want to add, Rick, since we got you on late, feel free to embellish. So go ahead.
Penguins are struggling massively on defense and in goaltender. I know you put it out, Richie, and I read it probably around noon, 1 o'clock-ish. Murray's out for a while. I mean, they need to figure out their defense and need to figure out in a hurry. You had 2 bad games on defense. One, your offense carried you to your win. To your loss, you didn't have it. So wait and see there. I'm kind of watching the Red Sox and Yankees on my phone, as in I'm watching the score, trying to update. So that looks like a good series. And we get to see Brewers and Dodgers. Who would have guessed those 2 teams at the beginning of the year? Dodgers would have been more of a guess, but Brewers. So.
Didn't you pick the Brewers?
I picked the Brewers at the beginning, yes.
So you're just patting yourself on the back.
No. I mean the beginning of the season. I picked them during the playoffs. I didn't pick them at the beginning of the season. I know I picked Astros, and I can't remember who I picked out of the NL, but it wasn't the Brewers or Dodgers. So I want to say I picked the Cubs. I want to say I picked the rematch of the World Series. So
I think we might have. I can't remember.
I want to say I picked the rematch, and I picked the Astros winning.
I'm just busting your balls because you always wear that stupid Brewers hat on the show.
I have one. No, I only have one Brewers hat. So in Cincinnati,
Which is one too many.
Oh, it's okay. Brewers aren't that bad. They have a good team. I mean, look at them. Astros set the model, and Brewers copied the model. I mean, so it's one model that's working for two teams right now.
I was just thinking a couple of weeks ago, Pirates had swept the Brewers, and everyone was thinking the Pirates were going to make a run to the playoffs, and look how things have changed.
They fell a couple games short. That was the problem. When you needed to beat the Reds and Cubs, I mean, Pirates struggled against the Cubs this year. I mean, they won some games, but they still struggled in the games they lost. So, but the other thing is too, and I said it, Pirates should think about keeping Tom Prince on or doing something. Tom Prince just got an interview today with the Reds, so add him to the list of 15 candidates currently for the Reds. I mean, but you're seeing a lot of guys. You're seeing the hitting coach / bench coach for the Giants and Bam Bam Mullins, Bam Bam Mullins, for the Pirate fans out there who remember him for that one season he played in like 92 or 3, somewhere in there. But I mean, like, they've interviewed Joe Girardi. John Farrell's already in their system. I know I heard David Bell is the favorite right now because his dad, Buddy Bell, for those who remember Buddy Bell, is in their front office. So I know he's up there. I mean, they have a lot of candidates. So Billy Hatcher, the old Pirate, was interviewed. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the Reds do because I think they're going to be pulling off the next try to do what Brewers did and everything. I think they're going to be selling some parts off this year again.
All right, Matt, what do you got? Final bill.
Oh, no. I don't have anything. I'm wore out. I'm tired. It's been a long week.
Last thing I have is the once proud franchise Detroit Red Wings are starting to take their red seats and paint them black because they don't have enough people coming to the games. So they want to hide it on television that the seats are empty. Mm-hmm. So that's the big thing coming out of Detroit is that they're going to paint the seats black, I believe, instead of the bright red.
I saw that too. That's an old professional wrestling trick because they were having problems seeing, so they black out everything. They'll black out the stands and everything so you can't tell how far back people go. I mean, it just shows you how that team was in top for so long and fell apart. So sad to see that.
What's a rebuild? And how do you think teams like the Carolina Hurricanes down here, they have the longest non-playoff streak in the NHL. They don't do things like that because those upper seats, they go for very cheap, and there's always crazy fans up there. It's like an old Miami Hurricanes trick. You tarp off the upper seats, or the old ACC championship trick, and then you have the cameramen just keep it all panned in. So then you don't know. Don't know the empty seats, but just go to show you, it doesn't matter how great the team is. I think Jeff on the Spacer Laces was talking about the Steelers' attendance being down. Doesn't matter. Fans don't want to pay outrageous amounts to see a poor product on the field. Bottom line. So that's it for the show. Follow us, S-Bound Sports on Twitter, Southbound Sports on Facebook and Instagram. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, any of your favorite podcast hosts. And we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.